My name is Lina, 20 years old, the daughter of a man who once called me his pride. But that night I learned I was nothing more than a commodity, sold to the highest bidder. The lights in the banquet hall were blinding, too bright for the girl in a second-hand dress that barely fit. I stood at the edge of the stage, trembling, my father's hand pressing hard into my back. His voice was low, but his words cut deeper than any knife. Don't embarrass me tonight. Do as you're told. I thought he brought me to a wedding banquet, maybe a business party. I never imagined the truth. He had dragged me to an auction. Not for jewelry. Not for art. For me. My legs shook as the announcer introduced me like an item on display. Laughter echoed in the hall. Men in suits whispered, women in diamonds smirked. Is she even worth anything? Poor thing, but I suppose someone will pay. A father selling his daughter, how desperate. Their words clung to me like poison. I wanted to scream, to run, but my father's hand tightened on my arm. She'll make a fine mistress for someone rich, he said with a mocking smile, his voice loud enough for me to hear. At least she'll be useful. The world tilted. My heart dropped. My own father had put a price tag on my life. The bidding began. Numbers rose, voices called out. Each one cut me open further. I clenched my fists, tears stinging my eyes. I wasn't a girl anymore. I was an object. And then silence. A glass clinked against marble. A low, commanding voice cut through the noise. 10 million. The room froze. Everyone turned. My breath caught when I saw him, Adrian Black, the infamous CEO, known for his ruthlessness. His black suit was tailored to perfection, his expression unreadable, his gaze cold. Women whispered, their envy dripping like venom. Of course Adrian would bid. He doesn't need a wife, he needs entertainment. Poor girl. She won't last a month in his house. Adrian leaned back in his chair, swirling champagne lazily, as if buying me was nothing more than a game. Sold, the announcer declared. Applause erupted, mocking and cruel. My father sighed in relief, his debts erased with the stroke of a number. He didn't even look at me. That night my identity as a daughter died. I was dragged to Adrian's side. His hand brushed my chin, lifting my face so I was forced to meet his eyes. You belong to me now, he said, his voice soft but sharp like silk hiding steel. Remember that. I wanted to spit in his face. I wanted to scream, but fear choked me silent. The crowd laughed again, the sound like knives against my skin. I was trapped, helpless, owned. Inside I whispered a promise to myself. This isn't the end. One day they'll regret underestimating me. But that night, under the cold gaze of a man who had just bought my life, I realized my story of humiliation was only beginning. If you felt my pain in these opening moments, stay with me. My journey is only beginning, and I promise you, it will shock you. And if my voice reaches your heart, please subscribe and tap like, so you'll never miss the next chapter of my story. The limousine was silent, too silent, except for the pounding of my heart. My father hadn't even said goodbye when Adrian's men escorted me into the sleek black car. He had sold me like trash, and now I sat across from the man who had bought me. Adrian didn't look at me at first. He typed lazily on his phone, the glow of the screen reflecting off his sharp jawline. I sat frozen, my hands clasped tightly in my lap, my second-hand dress wrinkled from trembling. Finally he spoke. His voice was deep, calm, but every word carried the weight of command. Rule 1. You don't speak unless I ask you to. Rule 2. You don't leave my sight without permission. Rule 3. His gaze lifted, pinning me with eyes colder than steel. Your life now belongs to me. Understand? I nodded, though my throat ached. He smirked. Good girl. The rest of the ride blurred. By the time we reached his mansion, no, his fortress, I felt like my soul had been drained. The gates were iron, taller than anything I'd ever seen. Inside, chandeliers dripped crystal light, marble floors reflected my trembling reflection, and servants bowed their heads as Adrian strode past. None of them looked at me with kindness. To them I was already tainted. Adrian didn't slow down. He led me upstairs, his stride long, mine shaky. When we reached his room, our room now, I froze. It was massive. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city skyline. A king-sized bed, dark sheets and a faint scent of leather and cologne filled the space. It felt suffocating. He turned, loosening his tie, his gaze raking over me. "You're even more pathetic up close," he said coldly. "A poor girl in rags. Did you think you'd catch my attention on your own?" My cheeks burned. I clenched my fists. But before I could answer, his hand shot out, gripping my chin, forcing me to look at him. "You belong to me," he repeated, his tone low, dangerous. "And tonight, I'll remind you of that." His words sank like poison. My body trembled as his lips brushed close to my ear, his breath hot, his tone mocking. "You think I bought you because I care? No. I wanted to see how far desperation could go. A father selling his daughter. Pathetic." Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I would not let him see me break. He pushed me back against the wall, his hand pressing into the fabric of my dress. The coldness in his touch was worse than fire. It was a declaration that I wasn't human to him. Just property. I gasped, my voice breaking. "Why me?" He chuckled, the sound cruel. "Because you're disposable. A maid's daughter. A nobody. I can use you, and when I'm done I can throw you away." The words stabbed deeper than his touch. For a moment I thought I might collapse. But inside something shifted. A tiny spark. A whisper, "Endure. Watch. Learn. And one day he'll regret this." That night, Adrian didn't just humiliate me with his possession. He shattered every illusion I had left about safety, family, or dignity. And yet, as dawn painted the sky in pale gold, I lay awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. My body was sore, my heart hollow. But my spirit whispered louder than ever. "I am not disposable. One day this cruel CEO will kneel at my feet." But for now I was trapped in his world of marble and ice. If you're still listening to my pain, don't leave me alone in this story. Subscribe now, stay with me, and like this video, because the deeper I fall, the sweeter my rise will be when the tables finally turn. I thought I knew what it meant to be poor, but nothing prepared me for the kind of emptiness that followed me into Ethan's world. His mansion was enormous, a sprawling palace of glass and marble perched high on the hills. It looked breathtaking from the outside, but the moment I stepped inside, I felt like I'd been locked in a gilded cage. Servants walked past me, their eyes sharp, their whispers barely hidden. To them, I was nothing more than a nobody bought and dumped into their master's home. They judged me just as my father had. Except here my father wasn't the one sneering. It was an entire house full of strangers. Ethan barely looked at me. He led me into a guest room at the far end of the hall and tossed his jacket on the sofa without speaking. His silence was colder than his words, and that silence carved deeper wounds than any insult. When I sat at the edge of the bed, my hands trembling, he finally spoke. "This is temporary. Don't think of yourself as my wife. You're here because it was convenient, nothing more." Convenient. That word sliced through me like a blade. My entire existence had been reduced to a transaction. A convenience for a man who didn't care if I broke apart piece by piece. I wanted to scream, to tell him I wasn't just some object, but the words stayed stuck in my throat. All I could manage was a shaky nod. That night sleep wouldn't come. The bed was soft, but my body felt heavy with dread. Somewhere in the mansion, Ethan moved about. His footsteps echoed faintly down the corridor, firm and unrelenting, like a man who owned everything he touched. The next morning I woke up to harsh whispers outside my door. "She's nothing but a maid's daughter, sold like cattle," one of the maids hissed. "Master Ethan won't keep her long. Girls like that never last." I clutched the blanket tighter around me, tears burning behind my eyes. They weren't wrong. I was nothing more than a poor girl dragged into a cruel man's life. But part of me burned with defiance. If I was destined to be thrown away, I wouldn't go quietly. Later that day, Ethan called me to his study. The air there smelled of leather and cedar, dark and masculine, and his presence filled the room like a storm cloud. He was seated behind his desk, looking through files, barely acknowledging me. "Sign these," he said flatly, sliding papers across the desk. I picked them up with shaky hands. A contract. Rules. Regulations. Restrictions. Everything about how I was to behave, what I could or couldn't do. I wasn't a wife, I was property, a shadow forced to exist on his terms. Why me? The words slipped out before I could stop them. For the first time, his eyes lifted to meet mine. They were sharp, piercing, like he could see straight through my skin to my soul. Because you were cheap. Disposable. My breath hitched. His cruelty was deliberate, sharp enough to wound, but in that fleeting moment, I swore I saw something else in his eyes, something unspoken, hidden behind the cruelty. Still, the way he said it made me want to disappear. I pressed the pen to the paper, my hand trembling as I signed my name. Each stroke felt like another piece of myself vanishing. As I slid the papers back to him, he leaned closer. His voice dropped lower, colder, but there was an edge to it that sent shivers down my spine. You belong to me now. Don't forget that. The words made my skin crawl, but strangely, they also ignited something I didn't understand. Fear, but also a dangerous curiosity. What kind of man hid behind this cruelty? Why did he need to remind himself and me of control? That night, lying awake again in the cold silence of the mansion, I realized something that scared me more than anything else. Ethan's touch, his voice, his piercing gaze, all of it lingered in my mind long after he was gone. And for reasons I couldn't explain, part of me didn't hate it as much as I should have. If you were in my place, would you sign those papers or refuse and risk his wrath? Tell me in the comments. And if you want to know what happened the first night Ethan finally touched me, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe, because the next part will leave you breathless. The night he finally came to me, the air itself felt heavy with dread. I had been pacing the length of my room for hours, clutching the thin nightdress the maid had left me. My heart wouldn't stop racing, no matter how many times I told myself to breathe. The knock at the door wasn't loud, but it was enough to make me freeze. Come in, I whispered, though my voice trembled. The door opened and there he was, Ethan, tall, sharp, his presence so overwhelming that the room itself seemed smaller when he stepped inside. He closed the door softly behind him, but that quietness was more terrifying than if he'd slammed it. For a long moment he just looked at me. His eyes were unreadable, his jaw tight. I wanted to hide, to shrink away, but his gaze held me like chains. You signed the papers, he said finally, his tone low and deliberate. Do you understand what that means? I swallowed hard, forcing myself to nod. Yes. Say it, he demanded. My lips parted, but the words tangled in my throat. It means I belong to you. Something flickered in his expression at my words. Triumph? Satisfaction? Or maybe something darker that even he didn't understand. He stepped closer, and I instinctively backed away until my legs brushed against the edge of the bed. When his hand reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my face, my entire body shivered. It wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel either. It was possessive, like he was testing the reality of owning me. You're shaking, he murmured, his voice husky now. Because I'm afraid, I admitted, my voice breaking. His eyes narrowed. Good. You should be. But then, something unexpected happened. His thumb lingered against my cheek, and his eyes softened just for a heartbeat. It was so fleeting I almost thought I imagined it. The tension in the room thickened. His hand trailed down from my cheek to my chin, tilting my face up toward his. My breath hitched as his lips came dangerously close. This was supposed to be simple, he whispered, almost to himself. A transaction. Nothing more. Yet his touch contradicted his words. It wasn't businesslike, it wasn't detached. It was heated, conflicted, like he was fighting himself as much as he was fighting me. When his lips finally claimed mine, the world tilted. It wasn't tender, but it wasn't brutal either. It was desperate. A man trying to convince himself he didn't care even as his body betrayed him. I should have pushed him away. I should have screamed, fought, resisted. But I didn't. Instead, my hands trembled as they gripped his shirt, holding on like I was drowning. And maybe I was. The kiss deepened, his control slipping for just a moment, and in that moment I felt it. He wasn't heartless. He wasn't unshakable. Beneath all his cruelty, there was a man starved for something he refused to name. When he finally pulled back, his breathing was uneven. He stared at me as though I had done something unforgivable. This shouldn't have happened, he said hoarsely, stepping back. But his eyes lingered, dark and hungry, betraying the lie in his words. He left the room abruptly, slamming the door behind him this time. My lips still tingled where his had been, and my body was still trembling, not just from fear, but from something far more dangerous. Because for the first time I realized the cruel CEO wasn't just a monster. He was a man who, after tasting me once, wouldn't be able to walk away. And deep down I wasn't sure if I wanted him to. I thought he would ignore me after that night. Pretend it never happened. A man like Ethan Black wasn't supposed to lose control, and kissing me had been his weakness exposed. Surely, he would cover it with silence, maybe even cruelty, as if to punish me for making him falter. But I was wrong. The very next morning I noticed it. At breakfast, when I timidly ate at the long dining table, Ethan sat across from me. He never usually looked up from his phone or his business reports. Yet that morning I felt his gaze on me, heavy, burning. When I dared to lift my eyes, his stare locked with mine. For a moment, his hand stilled on his coffee cup. Then he looked away, as if ashamed of something only he knew. I swallowed nervously and lowered my head, pretending not to notice, but my heart pounded. Why did it feel like his eyes had branded me? The staff whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. The CEO is different. He never eats at home, but now he's here every morning. And he keeps watching her. Strange. I told myself not to believe it. He wasn't watching me. He couldn't be. I was just a maid he bought, a contract, nothing more. But deep inside I felt it too, the change in the air whenever he entered a room. Later that day I found myself in the library. A sanctuary where I could breathe without eyes on me. My fingers trailed over the spines of books, searching for a story that might take me far away from this prison. But then I sensed it. That unmistakable presence. Do you enjoy reading? His voice came from behind me, low and unsettling. I turned too quickly, clutching the book to my chest. I was just... He stepped closer, closing the distance until I had to tilt my chin up to look at him. His cologne was intoxicating. His nearness overwhelming. Relax, he said softly. I'm not here to hurt you. The words should have comforted me, but they didn't. Because when his hand brushed over the book I held, grazing my fingers, I felt the truth. He was here because he couldn't stay away. I shouldn't want this, he murmured almost to himself. His eyes bore into mine, searching, questioning, as though he hated himself for needing me. You make me lose control. My breath caught. His confession struck me harder than any cruel word. This man, feared by the world, was admitting a weakness. For a heartbeat, silence wrapped around us. His hand lingered on mine, warm, possessive. My heart hammered so loudly I thought he could hear it. Then abruptly he pulled back. His jaw tightened, and the mask of coldness slid back into place. Stay out of trouble, he said sharply, his tone clipped now. And don't mistake my attention for affection. You're here because you belong to me. With that, he turned and left, the echo of his footsteps ringing louder than any shout. But no matter how he tried to bury it under cruelty, I saw the truth in his eyes. Ethan Black, the heartless CEO, was losing his grip. And it terrified me because I was losing mine too. For days, Ethan tried to pretend nothing had shifted between us. He returned to his cold routines, his clipped words, his distant air of superiority. But no matter how hard he tried, I felt his eyes on me. Always watching, always following, even when he wasn't near. I had almost convinced myself it was in my imagination, until that day. I was in the garden trimming roses for the dining room vases. The sun was warm, the air soft, and for once I allowed myself a small smile. That's when Michael, one of the junior executives who occasionally visited the mansion, walked past. He was kind, unlike the others who looked at me with scorn. He stopped when he saw me, offering a gentle smile. You always take such care with the flowers, he said. Your touch makes them bloom brighter. I blinked, startled by the compliment. No one spoke kindly to me here. My cheeks warmed, but before I could answer, the air shifted, the temperature seemed to drop. I looked up and my heart sank. Ethan was standing by the glass doors of the mansion, his eyes like burning coals. His jaw was clenched so tightly I thought it might shatter. He wasn't just watching. He was seething. Michael seemed oblivious. If you'd like, I can bring you a few rare seeds next time, he added kindly. I opened my mouth to politely refuse, but I never got the chance. The doors slammed open with a deafening crack. Ethan strode out, each step sharp, deliberate, like a predator closing in on prey. Michael froze, sensing the sudden danger. "Are you done wasting time?" Ethan's voice was low, controlled, but his fury was unmistakable. His eyes never left Michael's face, cold and merciless. Michael stammered, "I was only—" "Get out." The words were ice. "Now." Michael paled, then quickly muttered an apology to me before hurrying away. The garden, once warm and peaceful, now felt like a cage. I turned to Ethan, clutching the roses in trembling hands. "You didn't have to." His gaze snapped to me, and the fire in his eyes made my breath hitch. He moved closer, too close, until the thorns of the roses pricked my skin from clutching them so tightly. "Don't smile at him," he growled, his voice rough, raw. "Don't smile at anyone that way." I stepped back, shaken. He was only being kind. Kind. Ethan's laugh was bitter, humorless. "You think kindness comes without a price? Do you want me to show you what men like him really want?" His words cut deep, harsher than any slap. I tried to speak, but the truth in his tone silenced me. He wasn't jealous of Michael. He was terrified of losing control over me. His hand suddenly reached out, gripping my wrist with a force that sent the roses scattering to the ground. I gasped at the heat of his touch, the intensity in his eyes. "You belong here," he said, voice trembling as if he were holding back more than rage. "With me. Don't forget that." For the first time I saw him not as the untouchable CEO, but as a man unraveling. His arrogance had cracked, and beneath it was something dangerous, desperate. Something that terrified me more than his cruelty. Because in that moment I realized, Ethan Black wasn't just obsessed with control. He was obsessed with me. An obsession was far more dangerous than hatred. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the weight of his grip on my wrist, the sound of his voice declaring that I belonged to him. I paced the room he had given me, lavish yet suffocating. The silk sheets, the crystal chandelier, the soft glow of expensive lamps. None of it mattered. To me it was just another cage. I told myself I hated him, that I wanted nothing more than to escape. But why then did my pulse race whenever I thought of his eyes, burning with something between fury and desperation? I didn't want to admit it, but that moment in the garden had changed everything. The next morning I found him in his study. His jacket was tossed carelessly on the chair, his tie loosened, the usually perfect man looking undone. He stared at the city skyline through the massive window, his shoulders rigid. I hesitated in the doorway, but he turned sharply, sensing me. "You're avoiding me," he said flatly. I swallowed. "I don't want trouble." His jaw clenched. "Trouble finds you because you invite it." I flinched at his accusation, but something inside me snapped. I had been silent, submissive, enduring humiliation since the day my father sold me. But I couldn't stay silent now. "You think everything is about control." My voice shook, but I forced myself to continue. "You believe people are possessions to be bought and ordered around. But I am not your property, Ethan Black." The words hung in the air like a blade. For a moment I thought he would explode, lash out, crush me beneath his arrogance. But instead he froze. His eyes softened just for an instant before hardening again. He stepped toward me slowly, each stride deliberate. I wanted to run, but my feet wouldn't move. When he stopped in front of me, he was too close. His breath brushed against my skin, warm and unsteady. "You don't understand," he said in a low, ragged voice. "I don't want control of you. I want—" His words faltered, as if admitting them would shatter him. "I want you." My heart thundered. "Then why do you treat me like a prisoner?" His hands curled into fists at his sides. "Because if I let go, if I show you how much I want you, I'll never stop. And you'll never be free again." The rawness in his voice shook me more than his anger ever had. This wasn't the ruthless CEO the world feared. This was a man fighting a war against himself and losing. I wanted to scream, to tell him that his obsession terrified me, that I didn't want to be swallowed whole by his desires. But instead my voice came out as a whisper. Maybe I was never free to begin with. His head snapped up, eyes locking with mine. For a fleeting second his mask completely fell, and I saw the truth in his gaze. Ethan Black wasn't just cruel. He was broken. And in his brokenness, he had found me. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. I didn't know if I should fear him or pity him. But one thing was certain, this was no longer just about a forced marriage. This was about a dangerous bond that neither of us could sever. And deep inside, I knew. Everything was about to spiral beyond control. The following evening, the mansion was alive with music and laughter. Ethan had invited dozens of powerful businessmen, politicians, and celebrities for yet another grand party. To him it was routine. To me it was suffocating. I stood near the edge of the ballroom, wearing a gown he had chosen for me. Emerald silk that clung to my figure, dazzling under the chandelier lights. Everyone's eyes lingered on me, not with admiration but curiosity. Whispers traveled like fire. That's the maid his father forced him to marry. She looks out of place. My hands trembled as I clutched my glass of water. I hated this. I hated being displayed like an ornament, a possession. But Ethan? He was in his element. Tall, commanding, impeccably dressed. His aura radiated power. Women in glittering gowns flocked to him, trying to catch his attention. He smiled politely, but his eyes, they never left me. It was unnerving. His gaze burned into my skin, following me no matter where I moved. I felt trapped beneath it. When the music shifted into a waltz, a bold young socialite approached me. Her lips curved in mock sweetness. "You must feel lucky," she said loudly enough for others to hear. "From servant to Mrs. Black, tell me, how much did you sell yourself for?" Laughter rippled among her friends. My cheeks burned, but before I could respond, a shadow fell over us. Ethan. In one swift motion, he took my hand and pulled me into the center of the dance floor. Gasps filled the room. "Ethan," I started, but his grip was unyielding. "Dance with me," he ordered, his voice low, dangerous. The orchestra swelled and suddenly we were moving. His hand pressed firmly against my back, guiding me with precision, with possession. My breath caught. The crowd watched, stunned, as the ruthless CEO danced with the woman they had mocked. I dared a glance at him. His jaw was tight, his eyes stormy. Finally, he leaned down, his lips brushing against my ear. "Do you know what it does to me, seeing them look at you? Hearing them mock you? I want to tear them apart." His voice shook with restrained fury. "And yet, when I look at you, I feel powerless." My heart pounded. "Why are you doing this, Ethan? You don't even like me. You said I was a burden. A mistake." His steps faltered for a fraction of a second before tightening again. I lied. The word hung heavy between us. He spun me gracefully, then pulled me flush against his chest. His eyes bore into mine, stripped of arrogance, raw and unguarded. "I can't get you out of my head," he confessed, each word like a blow to his pride. "The way you fight back. The way you look at me with those defiant eyes. The way you don't bow to me like everyone else." His grip tightened. "You haunt me and it's driving me insane." My breath hitched. My body betrayed me, trembling under the intensity of his gaze. "You deserve better than this life," he whispered harshly. "But I can't let you go. I won't." The final note of the waltz rang out, and the room erupted in applause. But I heard nothing, only the thundering of my own heart. Everyone stared as he kept me in his arms, refusing to let go. The whispers now carried a different weight. Shock, disbelief, envy. For the first time, Ethan Black, the untouchable CEO, had exposed his weakness. And that weakness was me. But instead of relief, a cold fear wrapped around me. Because his confession wasn't tender, it was dangerous. Obsession disguised as love. And I knew my life would never be the same. The days after the ball were a blur of confusion. The whispers of society echoed in every corner of the city. Ethan Black danced with her all night. Is he truly obsessed with the girl his father forced on him? To them it was scandalous gossip. To me it was a prison tightening around my throat. Ethan grew more restless, more controlling. He refused to let me leave the mansion alone, and every time someone so much as looked at me too long, his fury erupted. He cloaked it as protection, but I knew the truth. His obsession was consuming him. I tried to reason with him. One morning I found him in the sunlit garden. reading over documents with that sharp, calculating gaze. Ethan, I began softly, this isn't right. You can't keep me like this. He didn't look up. Like what? A prisoner. My voice trembled, but I pressed on. You think what you feel is love, but it's not. Love isn't about cages. Love isn't about power. His pen stilled. Slowly, he lifted his eyes to mine. There was no anger in them, only an ache so raw it made my chest tighten. You don't understand, he said quietly. I've spent my whole life controlling everything. And yet, one look at you and I lose it all. His voice cracked. I'd rather chain you to me than risk losing you. Tears burned my eyes. And what about what I want, Ethan? Have you ever thought about that? Silence. For once, the great Ethan Black had no words. That silence gave me courage. That night I packed a small bag. I didn't care where I went. I just knew I had to reclaim myself before I lost everything. I crept down the grand staircase, heart hammering, praying he wouldn't hear. But of course he did. Going somewhere? His voice cut through the darkness like a knife. He stood at the bottom of the stairs, his silhouette framed by the moonlight spilling through the glass doors. I froze. Ethan, please. I can't live like this. He stepped forward, his eyes blazing with a mix of fury and desperation. You think you can just walk away? After what we've shared? After what you've done to me? I never asked for this. My voice broke. I never asked to be sold, to be trapped in your world. I never asked for you. The words shattered the air between us. For a moment, he looked as if I had struck him. His face hardened, but beneath the mask I saw it, the crack, the wound I had opened. And for the first time, Ethan Black, the ruthless, heartless CEO, looked defeated. His voice came out hoarse. If you walk out that door, I'll let you go. But know this. His chest rose and fell unevenly. You'll never be free from me. Not in here. He tapped his temple. Then his hand moved to his chest. And not in here. Tears blurred my vision. My hand trembled on the doorknob. I wanted to believe I could escape him. That I could start over. But deep down I knew he was right. Because even as I stood on the edge of freedom, part of me was still bound to him. I pushed the door open anyway. The cold night air hit my face, sharp and liberating. For the first time since my father sold me, I felt the fragile taste of choice. But with it came a haunting truth. This wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a battle between my desire for freedom and his unwillingness to let me go. And I feared that neither of us would emerge unscathed. The night swallowed me whole as I fled into the city. My bag was light, but my heart carried the weight of everything I'd endured. For the first time in months, I wasn't behind iron gates or gilded walls. I was free, or so I thought. Days turned into weeks. I rented a tiny room above a bakery, working long hours for little pay. The scent of bread clung to my hair. The flour dust settled into my clothes. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. Every coin I earned was proof that I existed outside of Ethan Black's shadow. But freedom wasn't as sweet as I imagined. At night I lay awake, haunted by the memory of his touch, his voice, the way his eyes softened when no one was looking. He had chained me, yes, but he had also broken something open in me that I couldn't close again. One evening, as rain hammered against the roof, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Heavy, certain. My heart froze. The door burst open, and there he was. Ethan Black. Soaked from the storm, his dark suit clung to him, his hair plastered to his forehead. His eyes burned into mine, wild, desperate, broken. You really thought you could hide from me? His voice was rough, ragged from sleepless nights. I backed away, pressing against the wall. Ethan, please. Don't do this. Don't. He stepped closer, fists trembling at his sides. Do you have any idea what these weeks have been for me? Every second without you has been hell. You don't own me. My voice cracked, but I forced the words out. You can't just. Before I could finish, he collapsed to his knees in front of me. The sight shocked me more than any anger ever could. Ethan Black, the untouchable CEO, knelt on a filthy wooden floor like a man stripped of everything. I don't know how to love, he admitted hoarsely. All I know is power, control, winning. But you, his voice broke. You make me weak. And I'd rather beg on my knees than lose you again. Tears spilled from my eyes. My body screamed to run. But my heart ached at the rawness in his voice. Slowly I crouched down in front of him. Ethan, love isn't about chains. It's about choice. And if you can't give me that, then this, whatever it is, will destroy us both. His hands trembled as he reached for mine, but he stopped just before touching. For the first time he hesitated. I'll try, he whispered. For you. Just don't walk away again. I should have left. I should have turned and run, sealed the door, erased him from my life. But as I looked into his eyes, I saw a man not just cruel and broken, but desperate for redemption, even if he didn't know how to find it. So with my heart pounding and my freedom trembling in my grasp, I made a choice. I placed my hand in his. His breath shuddered as he pulled me into his arms, holding me like a drowning man clutching air. And though fear still lingered in me, so did something else, something dangerous and undeniable. Because maybe, just maybe, his obsession had become my curse. And I knew then that whatever lay ahead, Ethan Black and I were bound, not by chains, not by force, but by something far more terrifying. By a bond neither of us could ever break. If you like, hit subscribe button. I will come back to you soon with more life pains.